Welcome to a skipped over Workshop Wednesday.
We have a lot to make up for.
Yeah.
Right?
And so actually what we're going to do this week is start a series for reconciliation. So reconciliation is what most accountants, bookkeepers would consider to be a core task, right? I mean, that's where you live, right, Carrie? In your
you're going to laugh. It's my most favorite thing to do. It's so important to understand and make sure you embrace it like I do. And then
why is it important?
Because I learned the hard way. I had a customer who had a $30,000 deposit that was a mistake and they left it outstanding. And when I deleted it because it was wrong, they said, no. And I had to really try explaining that it wasn't supposed to be there. So if you don't really understand the whole concept, it's hard to explain it to someone that really doesn't understand reconciliation, right?
Right.
Overstated. I mean, simple terms. They thought they had $30,000. Can you imagine if you had 30,000 extra in your bank account since March and we're rolling into December? It looked really nice, but it was wrong.
Right. So, that can give them a false sense of security, right? When you're looking at the bank balance in QuickBooks and assuming that is gospel. Like, oh, this is great. Look at all the money I have in my bank account. But the reconciliation is where the rubber really hits the road, right? Like this, because you have things being fed into QuickBooks or you're entering things into QuickBooks. Then there's a QuickBooks reality, and then there's the reality, and the reconciliation is where those two worlds collide. So whether if you really do have $30,000 extra in your bank account or not, that is going to, as one of my clients always says, bubble up to the surface. That's where those things are going to rise to the surface, and you're actually going to have those conversations like you had with your clients, like this should be gone.
Yeah, this is not good.
You really don't have 30,000 extra dollars on paper, right?
No, they did not. They did not appreciate that news at all.
Right. So what we're going to be talking about first is a fundamental truth, and this is something that I kind of came up with or developed, or my mindset around what QuickBooks does is centered around an idea of there are certain fundamental truths when it comes to QuickBooks, and one of those fundamental truths is where the opening balance comes from. So when you actually go to reconcile, there is a figure that you cannot modify called the opening balance or beginning balance. And that is a number that you need to match to the paper statement or your PDF statement.
Yes.
And when it doesn't, people lose their ish.
Right? They do. And it's like, to me, it's like you're knitting a blanket and everything's going along and you skipped a stitch or something. There's some term for that.
Right.
It's not good. You don't want to start a bank rec with a problem, but it happens.
And not just with knitting, the word darn comes out a lot.
Yeah, darn. That's the soft side.
Even worse than that.
Way worse. Yeah. You won't be doing cartwheels down the hallway over the bank rec if your opening balance is not agreeing with your bank.
With your paper statement.
Right.
Because that's the paper statement is the reality and the opening balance is the QuickBooks reality. And it gets increasingly maddening when you reconciled last month, right? And the assumption is, well, it reconciled last month. Why is my ending balance from last month not the opening balance this month? Because that's the way it is on paper, right?
And the ending balance and in this case, paper is my friend. I don't care how you save it. save the report so you can put that blanket back together. If you're missing that paper, I don't care if it's in the cloud or in your hand, you got to have the paper so you know where you were. You need to time travel to where you were when you had it working.
And that's another thing that we'll uncover and unpack during this reconciliation series of Workshop Wednesday. But you know, those actual reconciliation reports that QuickBooks creates and how they are frozen moments in time. But opening balance not matching in QuickBooks as it is in the paper statement. There are so there's two platforms, of course. We've been talking about dogs and cats, QBO and desktop, right? And they behave a little differently when it comes to the opening balance. But getting back to the fundamental truth, the opening balance to QuickBooks is the sum of all transactions that are previously reconciled. Now that means two different things to both platforms, but that truth is
from the beginning of time.
Right, exactly. So every time that you go into QuickBooks to reconcile, it runs that formula, right? What is the sum of all the reconciled transactions? Doesn't matter what they were reconciled, you know, when you last did your reconciliation. When you go to reconcile today, rerun that query, give me the total, and that's what shows up in QuickBooks. And we're going to kind of demonstrate that with Carrie and Desktop, and I'll do it in Online. So, Carrie, if you want to share your screen, I know you're very excited.
Well, I'm just wondering if my sample. Oops. Okay, they're just flew all my. Okay, so this is my sample file.
Right. So our ABC plumbing and the sample file. So when you go to reconcile,
right,
this bank account, let's take a look.
I'm just going to pretend I'm reconciling bank account.
Right.
Oh, I didn't.
That's okay. That's okay. Just look at the beginning balance here is 0.
Right.
And this from day one, that would be correct if we're starting from day one, but this would be incorrect because your paper statement says what?
So my paper statement says my beginning balance is 8751.99.
Okay.
Oh no. Wait. The bank, right? The bank.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm making a mistake. I'm making a common mistake. My bank says 9166.99. Now, if you look up at the top on the right, you see my bank's that's with my outstanding items.
Gotcha.
So my bank says 9166.99. Boom. So we need to get it.
Let's take a look at let's go into the register. So go into the bank register. Hit cancel here.
Okay. Yep. Problem. Okay. So heads up. This is that setup file. Okay. So I've got the 91. That's my beginning balance because I'm cutting off as of the end of the year. But I also
your paper statement says 9166.99.
Yep.
But QuickBooks says nothing
87.
because
nothing because
QuickBooks says nothing because nothing is reconciled. Right.
Reconciled.
This is a simplified. This is a simplified example. Clearly, when you get into some cleanup work, there's going to be more than 4 transactions that you're dealing with.
See, I created this own sample file for myself, so I made it easy. Right. But back to the 9166.99.
Illustration purposes only.
This is where I'm starting in a moment of time. I don't want to put the details of beginning 0 because this is a new client for me, and I'm starting them January. But I have to start somewhere, so I've got to reconcile that. So
now you can click on. So go ahead and click on the register and mark it as cleared.
It does not like that, but I'll do it.
It gives you that message that says, "Hey, you may mark it as clear, but it doesn't impact the opening balance." Hit record there.
Oops. All right, there. So record. Okay, hold on. Record. Do you want to change? Yes. It doesn't like it, but we
Again, it's
encourage
going to, again, you know,
scream.
it's going to scream at you each time.
Boom.
And QuickBooks Online is a little less screamy, but still, you get some messages about that. So now when you
So
go to reconcile, look, the bank balance and the beginning balance is still zero.
doesn't matter what you do here.
Right.
So
So that opening balance transaction, as it should be cleared and would go into the beginning balance here, because you marked it in the register,
doesn't
doesn't
matter.
impact the opening balance at all. So we have to do what's called a mini reconciliation to reconcile that transaction. And what we're doing is we're putting it to the end of last year, because in this particular situation, we are not concerned about all of the previous transactions for 2019 and prior. We just want to do that line in the sand. That was our ending balance of last month. So we want to reconcile that one transaction.
It's still mad at me. But
It's
look, it
still
already went ahead and cleared it for me because we cleared it over in the other place.
right,
But
right.
had
So
we
you
not
set
done
yourself
that, it would
up.
have looked like this,
Yeah.
right?
So you set yourself up by clearing it in the register so that it's automatically marked when you go to reconcile it in the
Or,
reconciliation module. So
or
that's the difference between desktop and online. It has to have gone through this screen. You've had to click on reconcile now in order for that fundamental truth of to take
and
the fundamental truth to actually occur.
I always recommend printing both. Now, when you're going through a history with like lots of transactions, you're going to go through a lot of paper. So do it so it's a PDF and a file, whatever. If you're anti-printing paper, I like the real thing. I'm not going to hit
So
print because I don't care.
do as I say, not as I do.
Right. This is such a small sample. But
Right.
what's nice is it gives you all this information. So if you
Right.
skip a stitch, you can get back to where you
Right.
were in a moment of time.
Right. So now go back to reconcile again, Carrie.
Okay. Let's go back to reconcile again.
Look,
Bam.
your beginning balance is now correct
Yay.
because you've actually reconciled that one opening balance transaction, right? So that is the fundamental truth of where the opening balance comes from inside of QuickBooks Desktop. So I'm going to go ahead and stop
I will
sharing.
stop share. Okay.
I am going to share my screen and
So how does the cat handle this?
right. So QuickBooks Online is a little bit different because you can modify transactions in the register and mark them as reconciled, and that balance then makes up the opening balance when you go to reconcile. So here I am in Craig's Landscape and Design. I'm going to go reconcile just so that we can see where we're at right off the bat. Get started. Let's do it. All right. So here we have a beginning balance of $5,000 for the checking account. So if I go to another tab, I'll keep that one here, and we'll pop over into the chart of accounts. Take a look here. Here's our checking account. We view the register. Get rid of all these alerts. Now, if I just want to look for all the reconciled transactions, I can do that. And there is our opening balance transaction that's marked with an R, and it's marked as reconciled. So now I'm going to unreconcile it, which I wouldn't recommend doing.
Don't do it.
This is just for illustration purposes because I am unreconciling it. And we'll go back to refresh the screen. You see the beginning balance is still 5,000, but I haven't refreshed. I'll come back into reconcile. My beginning balance for checking is 0. All right, back over to the register. I have to find that transaction now.
Run. There it
Down
is.
here, I'm going to mark it with an R and save it. And it's going to it's going to yell at you, and you can dismiss it, which is not what I would recommend doing because you really don't want to be reconciling transactions in the register directly. But now, again, I only have that one transaction that is marked with an R.
Your bank balance
Refresh.
is terrible.
I know. Don't judge me. And look, the beginning balance,
You tricked it
is back
out.
to 5,000. So I don't have to do that mini reconciliation step in QuickBooks Online because I can reconcile transactions in the register directly. So it's a double-edged sword. So
Yeah, it's dangerous.
it's a good thing to do. I mean, it's possible to do. Just know what you're doing,
Which
right?
is kind of part of
And
why we do these workshops.
if you serve cats and dogs, QuickBooks Online Desktop and QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop, understand that the difference between the two of reconciling transactions in the register is not going to have the same effect in your online as it is for QuickBooks Desktop.
I have a question for you. Since
You
you're
do.
seasoned support person and you remember back to probably V1, maybe not that far, but didn't we used to be able to do this in desktop and they took
Yes.
it away? Well, maybe they took it away because it's dangerous.
Right.
Okay.
Because that is
Be careful.
yeah, I think it was like QuickBooks 2002 when they really overhauled the reconciliation module in QuickBooks Desktop, and that's when that came into play,
'Cause I
being
remember
able to.
doing that. I remember doing
Right.
the R's and having it scream at me, and I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
So I popped in the comments of our Facebook Live, a blog article that really kind of reiterates what we've talked about here today about the fundamental truth of the opening balance in QuickBooks Online and Desktop. And we'll continue to keep doing these, go into the next level. But the main thing here is that your opening balance typically needs to match your
Bank
opening balance
statement.
of your bank statement before you even begin reconciliation. So,
Right. If that's off, you've got to stop. You can't
right.
skip this.
But knowing where that opening balance comes from in the different platforms will help you understand when we actually get into
Yeah.
unpacking and uncovering. How do I figure out where this came from, right? Because I can run a report. Of course, this was a simplified example,
Yeah.
but if you have tons of transactions that have been reconciled, you can run a report for all reconciled transactions in
Which,
QuickBooks Online, and that total will be your opening balance. I mean, that is part of where that fundamental truth comes from. It's when you put in the reality of, well, I reconciled last month, but that we need to really unpack and determine, well, what changed between the last time that you reconciled and today? Because unlike your frozen moment in time of it did reconcile, it
you can
doesn't,
stop.
QuickBooks allows you to delete, edit, modify transactions, and that's again that double-edged sword of, that's a good thing, you're able to do that, but it's a bad thing when you've reconciled the transaction and you're modifying a reconciled transaction, which
So
again, QuickBooks will yell at you when you've modified a reconciled transaction, but that doesn't mean that you cannot not do it.
double negative.
Double
And
negative, but
worst case scenario is get the transactions from the bank from day one to today, but we'll
right.
we'll talk through how to do it without the
So that is
the longest way ever to fix.
right. So that is our workshop today, and really just want to drive home that one fundamental truth of where the opening balance comes from. Understand that the opening balance is different between desktop and online as far as where that comes from and how it got there. So you have to have done you have to have reconciled the transactions through the reconciliation module in desktop.
Yeah.
But as long as it's marked with an R, I like to say it's like a pirate ship. There's an R in there somewhere. If it's marked with an R in the register, then it's part of the opening balance, whether you reconciled it or not.
Right.
So Any closing thoughts that you have about the opening balance and that fundamental truth? I know we came in here a little hot. We had meetings after meetings and
a meeting day, lots of meetings today. No, but just as long as you understand that concept, all the way back to trying to knit the blanket again. I mean, it's just important to understand that the bank is just going to each month add what goes in, what goes out, gives you a number, and you need to understand that that's what's needed for the bank rec. We're not going to get in book balances different. We'll talk about that later, but that number is really important to understand. Where does the bank number come from? It will not match your book balance. Don't try that. Just try to make sure you have all the data that the bank has said. You want all that data in your QuickBooks, one way or another.
And we're going to talk about those different balances in future workshops. So join us next Wednesday for another Workshop
Wednesday. I'm getting it all mixed up. Wonderful workshop Wednesday.
Right. www. All right. See you next time.
Bye-bye.